Hey everybody, Beardo here with more Batman books to show you. We're going to kick it right away today because while yesterday's run by Larry Hama was very short, we're going to cruise through almost the entirety of the next writer's run. And it was the up-and-coming Ed Brubaker that was going to be the next guy to get to tackle the cowl. Now, Ed Brubaker is someone, obviously, who's very famous for his noir, a perfect fit for Batman. His run on Batman isn't quite as perfect as one might hope, but there's a couple of reasons for that. The first reason is you've still got Scott McDaniel on art, and Ed Brubaker really would thrive in the very gritty film noir kind of style artwork. That's just not something that Scott McDaniel delivers, which isn't to belittle his artwork, because early, especially in his run on Batman, his artwork is actually very good and very, has a lot of great vibe to it, even though it is really cartoony. The problem is later on down the road, he kind of falls into the kind of the Kelly Jones trap of, his style is very specific and needs a lot of finesse, otherwise it doesn't look very good. And the same kind of thing happens with Scott McDaniel here and later in the Batman issues, and then very much so when he switched over to Superman. Now, the other reason why Ed Brubaker's run is a little lackluster for me is just because his run on Batman is really a prelude to his sort of DC masterpiece, in my opinion, and that is Gotham Central. That came right after he was off of Batman. So as much as I do enjoy these, and he reintroduces some, sorely needed kind of, arcs and through lines and plots and things like that, rather than just villain of the week, villain of the week, villain of the week, it's really just sort of preamble for, in my opinion, one of his best works, which is Gotham Central. Now, his very first issue, he kicks off the beginning of what's going to be kind of his big arc throughout Batman, and that is introducing this character named Zeiss, who has these sort of time goggles. He can record playback, and he kind of learns how to fight Batman based on sort of watching him. Now, Zeiss is indirectly responsible in this very first issue for killing someone that is sort of an ex-con that Batman has taken in under his wing, but sort of under the Bruce Wayne guise, and giving him a job. And Zeiss is kind of indirectly responsible for his fall from grace, and then his untimely death in sort of like a bank robbery incident, literally on the very first few pages of this. So he immediately makes this, fight with Zeiss very personal, and they kind of, butt heads at the very beginning here in 583, but then Zeiss escapes, and he's going to be kind of the guy that Batman is gradually after, kind of the guy behind the scenes throughout the entirety of Brubaker's run. And we'll get to that kind of as we get a little further in. Before we continue with the bigger arc, Brubaker did give us sort of a one-shot story here with a camera crew that's basically going around Gotham trying to learn more about Batman and, see if he's an urban myth or reality, as it kind of says on the cover. And of course, Batman makes a big appearance at the end and saves the kids from, their folly of going into Arkham Asylum and sitting alone in a room with Two-Face, if I remember correctly. Anyway, now, next up, we kind of introduce the next major player Brubaker is bringing to us, and that is a very familiar character indeed, the Quacking Penguin. Now, the thing with having the Penguin in here is, he's really trying to bring back the Penguin as kind of a crime lord and really trying to introduce some sort of Gotham City underground criminals. And, Zeiss is mixed up in that, and there's a lot of almost Godfatheriness going on with this, where Zeiss is kind of like the, oh crap, I can't think of his name now. Fredo. He's kind of the Fredo of the piece in the sense that, he's trying to be in control, but he's really not that good at what he's doing, and he's mostly on the run. Whereas, the Godfather types, the Michael Corleone, that is the Penguin, is very much more in charge, but obviously, the Penguin's still much more incompetent than Michael Corleone. And then in 586, we have the issue where Batman dies. Now, this is kind of a interesting enough stunt from DC. Basically every Batman book they put out this month, every single issue had Batman dying. Now, I didn't read any of the other ones, but in this one, it's a dream sequence, folks. It's just Penguin's wish, and it's his imagination, and it's a huge waste of your time. Alright, now, the other person who was working on Batman at this time in Detective Comics was Ed Brubaker's longtime collaborator, Greg Rucka. And they brought us Officer Down, which ran, it's another one of those mini, crossover events that runs for like a month and then it's done. And basically this is James Gordon getting shot on duty and ends up having to sort of give up being police commissioner for a while. Now, after we wrap up the Officer Down story, which ran for about 7 or 8 issues across all the Batman titles, we break off from Ed Brubaker's run and get a very entertaining run by Brian K. Vaughan, actually, in 588, 589, and 590. Now, basically, this storyline is an interesting kind of juxtaposition of Bruce Wayne's many, many identities. And you have the return of Matches Malone in here. Obviously, Matches Malone just made an appearance in Batman Incorporated. And you have Nightwing pretending to be Batman, while Bruce Wayne's pretending to be Matches Malone. But then, after the real Matches Malone gets out of prison and ends up being killed because everybody thinks he's a snitch, because obviously Matches Malone is always, feeding information to Batman, but of course it is Batman. And Bruce Wayne really takes this to heart, and in 589 is where Matches Malone actually dies, and then all of a sudden you have Bruce Wayne, who's kind of lost sense of identity. Actually, he's talking like Matches Malone in the Batman costume. He's completely confused and everything's kind of crazy. And then in 590, he kind of has to reconcile all of his different identities. Kind of a fun little story. Just a 3-parter, one-off, but very well told by Brian K. Vaughan. Now, in 591, we do have another villain in town. Deadshot's come to town to do some killing. I don't remember who he's supposed to assassinate, but he's here to assassinate some people. Deadshot's going to be important later on. It's another thread that Brubaker's kind of introducing. And again, you kind of have Zeiss in the background of these issues, kind of on the run, but also kind of trying to pull the strings at the same time. And then we're going to kind of break off from the norm to bring us another one of those pesky tie-in issues. This is actually a 3-parter tie-in, or maybe it's a 2-parter. Sorry, 2-parter tie-in. Tying with Our Worlds at War, the whole Alien storyline that DC put out. I always thought it was more of a Superman thing, but then I read these and discovered, no, it's the whole DC as usual. You do have Zeiss in the background again, so even though these are basically tie-in issues to another story, Ed Brubaker is trying to maintain his own story arc in this. And that's another kind of shortcoming of his run, is that the DC editorial staff just butchered their writers during this time period, Brubaker's trying to build this whole thing up with Zsasz, and he just kind of has to keep doing it in the guise of all of these other things that DC sort of wants him to be working on. And then in 595, we have a Halloween story. Yay! And then 596, we have another tie-in. This is with Joker's Last Laugh, which is a little bit more appropriate to be tying in with Batman. And again, it's one of those things, it's kind of like the Alan Grant problem, where he just kind of kept getting bogged down. Ed Brubaker does a better job of juggling these with his storyline, because you do get Zeiss appearing in all of these issues. But again, it's just really, taking away from the experience that I feel like Brubaker would have given us if he had had a little bit more full reign and gotten a different artist on the book. Now, in 597, Batman kind of finally takes down Zeiss, and we get kind of the conclusion of this arc. And then 598 is a Christmas story. Kind of a cool cover. Wouldn't expect it to be a Christmas story, but there you go. And that's kind of the conclusion of Brubaker's first arc on Batman. Now, he only has a few issues left of Batman after this, less than a year, but it's a big year because it's going to be one of those humongous crossover events. So I will be back tomorrow with the next big Batman crossover, and we will continue our modern age history tomorrow. See you soon!